Over 10 years, we need our reserves up to $2 million. And increasing public engagement, as you are seeing here in practice here tonight with this presentation. Infrastructure and climate adaptation. We want to remediate brownfield land, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and focus on curbside collection of solid waste and recycling. We have identified some key projects that relate to each of our strategic priorities and are currently working to move them forward. Community centering, that's related to organizational capacity. It needs to be renovated for administration and/or fire rescue housing. Lone Water Farm Project, that's related to smart growth. Recreation Hub, smart growth and community vitality. Our school, that is related to smart growth, and seniors housing also. Snow and ice control, organizational capacity, and our public works garage, again, that will increase our organizational capacity. Some of these we have control of, and we know will come to completion, such as the works garage. Others we do not have control of, such as the Lone Water Farm Project or the school. But your council are advocating constantly, strategically, and proactively to move these forward. These projects are crucial for the future growth and sustainability of our community, and we will continue our work to bring them to fruition. The purpose of the strategic plan is to set goals and to prioritize specific actions within our tactical plan to achieve these goals. Implementation of the plan will allow our municipality to seize the opportunities before us and build on success. The budget is its financial manifestation. Under smart growth, we are advocating for the province to enhance educational facilities and to partner for multi-use purposes. Multi-purpose uses even, same thing. We are working to facilitate childcare spaces in the community, and we are implementing the Economic Development Action Plan. We are actively attracting developers to build a diversity of housing options in the town, and are engaging with external stakeholders, developers, real estate agents, and landowners. All of this will help us to increase a diverse new assessment base, supporting the conveniences and amenities needed by our residents. This important work will create greater financial resiliency, which is critical for our sustainability and will help us to attract and retain families from across Canada and the world. We are constantly focused on increasing our organizational capacity, which will allow us to do more and do better for our residents. Our plan calls for us to ensure council processes and decisions are communicated clearly and in a timely fashion to residents. To develop and maintain a corporate culture that is healthy, progressive, and serves residents and business through council. To support the capacity required to pursue project-based grants, which often have complex application processes. The work involved in continuing to support regional collaboration is ongoing and intense. Professional development of council and staff is also embodied in the plan. The strategic pillar of infrastructure and climate adaptation involves the review of the asset management plan to incorporate all town assets. It is also beneficial for smart growth to ensure the town's groundwater is sustainable for current and future growth and development. The plan also calls for work to be done to determine a carbon neutral master plan in conjunction with the town's climate change action plan, as well as disaster mitigation planning. Much work is ongoing with the strategic pillar of community vitality. We will continue to implement the comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We are working towards becoming a center of wellness for the diversity of health professionals. We have a strong focus on the benefits that community events have for our residents and for our growth. We have increased the vitality of the town with signature events like Fall Festival, the Mayor's tree lighting, Family Day, and more. We continue to forge and strengthen partnerships with worship sites and local schools. We are enhancing arts and culture opportunities and supporting our community groups so they are also strong, vibrant, and sustainable. Our common desire to see the abundance of our town grow and mature and to see our neighboring communities flourish will guide us into the future. The present and future vibrancy of our community is in every beat of our hearts and is at the core of everything we do. Our work is about today as much as it's about tomorrow. We are committed to collaboratively building a community for everyone by making our vision a reality for the benefit of all. John?
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. And it's a great pleasure tonight that we present the budget. The process started at the end of June, and there were countless hours over the summer. We had our big strategic plan review at the end of August, and then there's been ongoing meetings internally with council, vendors, and we've tried to learn as much as we could about the environment going forward. So we hope that the budget that we present tonight ticks off all the boxes that council's laid in front of us. The key delivery of core services at the level that council wants, as well as implementing the strategic plan. But before we get going any further, we just want to highlight a couple of key points about the town. The town is not the town of this time last year. We now have Ward 2, and the total population is 5,866. Whereas before we had about 2,000 homes. This year we have about 2,400 homes. And Stats Canada doesn't have any data for us to track trends or what the demographics are. So in some regards, we're flying blind when it comes to making some decisions regarding what today and tomorrow needs. This year as well, which we actually experienced for the first time today, the town doing snow and ice control. We're all excited. We're also very nervous. I think that's a fair comment. And we're looking forward to being able to provide a great level of service for our residents. I just want to point out that if we had gone with the contracted service for snow and ice control, AVL would be delivering it, and it would cost us about $1.1 million. By doing snow control internally, we're looking at a cost of about $900,000. Now, if we have a major storm every week until the end of March, we will blow through that $900,000. But I want to assure council that when we look at the snow budget, and as we build for the future, because we're going to need snow control reserves, what we're looking at is how affordable is it over, say, five years of time? Because last year, doing snow control internally would have been fantastic. This year, it started today, and the forecast for the winter is not great if you don't want to do snow control. I just want to assure everybody that the team down at the Public Works Department is very excited. They've been taking training, and you may have even seen them while they're training, driving the trucks up and down the road. And then today, I believe they're doing the core run on Route 177, which is Maripus Road and River Valley Drive. Another extenuating circumstance for the budget, we first saw this last year where costs increased, new costs. The Regional Service Commission is still considered a startup. They're still trying to find their way. They're going to be delivering new services next year, and they're looking at implementing their regional strategic plan. Now, where does the Regional Service Commission get their funding? They get it through membership fees from us, but they also get it through the province as well, and then the Regional Development Corporation for the delivery of certain projects. Our fee in 2024 is unchanged from 2023 at approximately $260,000. Now, when we send our money to Fundy Regional Service Commission for the regional facilities, that is money that we've spent going back 20 plus, 25 plus years. And that goes to the Trade and Convention Center, the St. John Arts Center, the Aquatic Games Center, the Imperial Theater, and Envision St. John, which we started up in 2020. And then, of course, we can't forget TD Station. So that's where the money goes, which has been allocated on an annual basis for some time, with the exception of Envision St. John, which is we're going into our fourth budget for Envision St. John. And now I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, James Barrington, and he's going to walk us through some budget reflections.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Your Worship, Council. Just wanted to take a moment to reflect on the 2023 budget. It's fair to say it's been a challenging year. Staff and the leadership team have done an amazing job staying within the limits of their budgets so far this year. There have been many curveballs thrown at them. Inflation, you'll hear that word mentioned many times this evening, has caused many challenges. That's resulted in fewer bids on capital projects. Equipment maintenance costs are up. We're preparing for snow and ice control. Higher interest rates mean higher finance costs. And local governance reform has caused us to incur some extra costs. On the good news, we have had some money refunded from the province for that, which has helped the bottom line. We are currently projecting a very small surplus. It is a small amount as we head into the winter season. We could see that evaporate, so we're keeping a close eye on it. Another challenge that we've been faced over recent years are funding challenges. So the Community Equalisation and Funding Grant is a grant we receive every year from the province. This is a pool of money. There's approximately $62 million across New Brunswick, and this is shared out to the municipalities across New Brunswick. Since 2022, we've seen the funding to Bay-Westfield drop by $370,000. This is a significant portion of the town's budget. The only way to make up a gap like that is through taxation. The province has been redirecting some of these funds to the regional service commissions for their new mandates, and we've been actively advocating for some clarity around the formulas on how these amounts are calculated. Recently, we received our assessment amounts. We saw a healthy increase, 11.4% to the assessment base in the town. However, on the flip side, only 9.8 million of that was related to new developments. The rest is a market adjustment, meaning existing households in the town saw the values of their properties rise. This limits our revenue generation ability because we're pulling from the same pool of homeowners as their property values go up. What type of properties do we have in Bay-Westfield? Well, we're 98% residential households, 2% commercial. That's a very heavy weight towards homeowners. What that means is any change to the town's costs are felt directly by households. There's no insulating factor of a commercial or industrial base within the town. If we look at the assessment growth over time, we can see that up until around 2021, there was a relatively flat to small increase in the assessed value of homes. Since 2021, there has been really good assessment growth. 23 saw the inclusion of Ward 2, and in 24 we saw the 11% increase, which equates to around $61 million. What's the breakdown of that $61 million? Well, 84% is on existing properties. So what can we garner from this? Well, we're a community of households, and the value of those households are going up. What's not going up is new construction. 16% is a small amount of growth from new construction, and it means that any increased tax burden is felt by the same pool of people. So a common theme you'll hear here tonight is that we need to grow not just the assessment, but the makeup of that assessment. We need commercial businesses and we need new construction. So just an example of how new construction can help the tax burden on homeowners. Let's say that we're paving a road and we put the tenders out and the bids are $100,000 higher than expected. So we have an extra $100,000 in cost. 84% is the makeup of that assessment growth. So that would mean that $84,000 of that cost falls on existing homeowners, where $16,000 is absorbed by new homeowners. If we can move that makeup so that, say, 30% is new construction, then the existing homeowners only bear $70,000. So it reduces the impact to the tax burden of existing homeowners. Another common theme here tonight would be inflation. So just to give some historical context to where inflation's been and where it is now, the last 20 years, 20 plus years, it's hovered around between 0% and 3%. Mid-2022, we saw it reach 8.1%. Now, it started to come back down, but very slowly, and it's hovered around 4%. Predictions are it's going to be around 4% for the foreseeable future. So this is a challenge that we're going to be faced with for the next couple of years. And we're going to change gears a little bit, talk about the level of service and tactics we're going to employ in 2024. Essentially, how are we going to get things done? How are we going to use the budget dollars to meet council's strategic objectives? So the priorities for 2024, we're going to continue to implement a number of plans that we have in place around communications, economic development, fire rescue, and parks and recreation. We're moving snow and ice control operations in-house. We're looking to enhance financial services. Still working through local governance reform and continue along with the road maintenance plans that we have. In the finance department, we're going to continue process enhancements. 2023 saw a number of initiatives in the finance department, and we're going to continue along with those. We're looking at a new information system. The current information system that we utilize is really aimed for small businesses. It doesn't meet all of the needs that we have, so we're looking for one that's really aimed for the municipal sector. So we can continue to give council timely reporting. Tied into that, we're going to pick up the pace of financial reporting, map out our processes and document them, and then implement some cross-training within the department. I'll now ask the Communications Manager, Brock, to come forward and take you through the Communications Department.
Thank you, James. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. The 2024 perspectives for the Communications Department include website enhancements with a review of the town's emergency alert system, as well as email notification options for reaching our residents through our news and events. Residents and visitors may have noticed signage at the end of Narrabus Road, the southern end of Highway 7, and in the near future, the northern end of Highway 7. The town will continue to review its branding, including additional signage options for 2024. The Communications Department continues to develop and implement communications plans and policies while continuously working on crisis communications materials. Media training for council and administration has also been identified as an item for 2024. We have an amazing customer service team here at the town. The final item refers to the town looking into options for tracking of customer service requests when they're received. On that note, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone watching that the town is always here to help. If anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns regarding town services, please contact the town office. There's a slide at the end of this presentation this evening with complete details. And for the most up-to-date information, residents are encouraged to follow the town by visiting our website at grandbaywestfield.ca and our official social media platforms. In addition to attending in-person, town council and PAC meetings are also available on the town's YouTube channel. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I'll now turn it over to Troy, the fire chief.
Thank you. Your worship, members of council, thank you. So for the fire department for 2024, we completed our our fire service review earlier this year, which was received by council. So we'll be looking to continue implementation of some of the recommendations in that review. Our Community Connect is a new service that we'll be looking to launch either late this year or very early next year, which will allow residents to provide information to the fire department in the event of an emergency that the fire department will be able to access right from the front seat of the truck as they arrive on scene. It can be things like location of valuables, if there's any pets in the home, any other information where some contact information, if there's nobody home at the time of the emergency, those types of things. Over the last year or two, we've been putting a strong effort on our policies and procedures and reviewing those. We're going to incorporate a little with some of the recommendations from the fire service review and continue that work. Last council meeting, council approved our first fire rescue department level of service policy. So we'll be looking to ensure that we're meeting all of the statements and procedures in that. And our Superior Tanker Shuttle accreditation we'll be announcing or posting tomorrow. We've recently received a new fire apparatus, a new fire engine for the department. Council was over this evening and did our arrival ceremony and officially handed over the keys. So with that now in place, we'll be able in 2024 to do our tanker shuttle accreditation, which basically shows the insurance industry that we have the capacity to provide X amount of water to the scene of a fire as needed. And in the hopeful result of that is they'll recognize that and lower our residents' insurance rates. Unfortunately, we can't promise that. Insurance is kind of an individual basis type of thing. And then finally, we're going to look at our fire prevention and public education service. We do provide that within the department, and we're going to look to expand that a little bit further next year. And with that, we will now move over to Parks and Recreation, and Rick Adams, our program program. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. As mentioned earlier during our CFO's update, they are looking into an improved use of technology for the town. During that review, we're going to try and adopt a facility booking system and management system within the framework of their product, but we're also reviewing outside products in the event that it can't be adopted properly. The reason being that we want to improve the public user process when they're booking. Right now, it's a manual process through our website, and by finding an easier user interface, we hope to increase the usage of our facilities, which speaks to our second item. We've continued to try and optimize the use of our facilities like Brendan's Point River Center, and that's going to continue to be a goal for us, along with increased usage of the River Valley Room, which is formerly our seniors room. And then by bringing on this system, we hope that the new facility infrastructure that we're researching that's been mentioned earlier, like Longwater Farms or a recreation hub, will be able to be optimized immediately upon development. Part of what we want to do with all those facilities is continue our interactions and partnerships with established community groups. There's over 24 local community groups that do incredible work for this community. We partnered with 2 of them this past weekend for the Halls of Terror event, which drew over 1,000 residents into the River Valley Middle School, partnering with the middle school and the River Valley Home and School, and hopefully raising several $1,000s to develop more facilities around the school, which will be available to everyone in the public in the near future. Working with those community groups, we hope to continue to grow events like Halls of Terror, Fall Fest, Canada Day, Family Day. Those are our existing events that we want to continue to grow and increase users from around the community. For Canada Day this year, we had residents coming from all over the greater St. John area. and had 1,400 people come through the River Valley Community Center, and we want to see that number grow year over year. And one final thing that we're focusing on really heavily with those community groups and with our age-friendly committee is to increase our intergenerational interactions. We've already been contacted by the local school district to partner with them in March, April on a project, and we've been in touch with all 4 schools about starting some projects in the near future. We hope to grow those in late 2023, early 2024. The last thing I'm going to take the opportunity, since I'm getting to be in front of the public, is to quickly speak about our community grants. Over this past year, Council supported the community grants by doubling the amount of funding to those groups. And in the spring, we supported 7 different projects happening within the community with $5,950. And in the fall, we supported another 7 groups with $5,793. And we hope to do that again this April and next September, continue to support all the community groups that are running projects throughout our community. I will now turn it over to David Taylor, our Development Officer, to discuss planning.
Sir.
Good evening. We have a few initiatives for next year for the planning department. First, although everybody's seen the 2 24-unit apartment buildings built over the last couple of years, we really have typically seen single-family homes built in the town. So the town's focus will be on promoting more density, more multi-unit apartment buildings, and seniors living units. In 2019, the town adopted its first development incentive program designed to encourage larger projects, energy efficiency, and new lot subdivisions for future development. However, construction costs and population growth have just exploded, causing extreme pressures on affordable housing, especially for low and middle income earners. As a result of that, the incentive program that we'll bring in will change its focus to new multi-unit residential development instead, with financial assistance provided to those projects with a minimum of 6 or more 2-bedroom units. Also in 2019, we had adopted a climate action change plan. It established initial community and corporate greenhouse gas reduction targets for 2025 through 2035, and we have currently met 4 out of our 5 milestones under that program. However, this year with local government reform, the town's grown bigger geographically, increased population, and increased operations from the Works Department, which will all have to be reflected in a new plan. So to that end, we're going to partner with Quest NB PEI for an application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, as well as the Environmental Trust Fund, to engage community in reevaluating those greenhouse gas emissions. The revised climate action plan will help direct us towards a net zero or carbon neutral world as set out by the provincial and federal timelines. Finally, our new municipal plan that we just adopted is advocating housing affordability and increasing a variety of housing types. So next year we'll be working to explore opportunities to effectively process an increased number of projects. Thank you. Now the first question.
Thank you. Yes, 2024 is going to be an exciting year, The Works Department, and John DeSale there mentioned earlier, the Works Department is now doing in-house snow control. Apparently, and they said it started today, a little ahead of schedule. But also on that, we're also doing parks, which started last year. So we have new equipment, new personnel, and new roles. So next year, we'll be fine-tuning that. Again, when we go through snow and ice, we have a new snow and ice plan that we're going through. So we'll be monitoring that, updating that, and that'll be our focus for the next 6 months. 100% will be on snow. But then as we move on after snow, then we're back to parks. And we've had 1 year with that, So I think we did pretty good with that, but again, we'll be able to improve it with more personnel. And again, in the summertime, we'll be able to look after the parks a little better. And again, with more personnel, we're also looking to do some repairs and maintenance in-house, again, to save dollars instead of contracting it. So the operation has changed from what it was. It's gonna be new and improved, and again, as I said, snow is gonna be the main focus for the next 6. With the new trucks, new equipment, we'll be learning the routes. So there'll be a little bumps here and there, but we'll get through it, and again, we'll be able to monitor it and make improvements where they need to be. And again, with that, snow is gonna be a big portion of it, but then back to parks in the summertime. And again, the other aspect that I think was mentioned earlier with James with assets is we're also, with more personnel, we're able to do more video inspection and storm sewer sanitary asset inspections to make sure we catch them before they fail. So the Works Department is looking forward to next year. All right, thanks. James.
Thank you, Bruce. So the first budget we're going to walk through this evening is the sewage utility budget. So the sewage utility operates as a separate entity from the regular budget of the town. So it is self-funded through user fees, and it has to have a balanced budget, just like the regular budget. So what comprises the sewage utility? So we gathered some statistics and information to just give some perspective of what the sewage utility is and what comprises it. So it services 1,800 households. There's 2 treatment facilities. There's the sewage going down on Shannon Road and a small trickling filter plant up on McLean Road. There's 50 kilometres of sanitary sewer lines running underneath the roads. 681 manholes, 9 lift stations, 16 residential pumps, and 13 grinder stations. So there's quite a bit involved in operating the utility. It's not just the above ground assets that you see. Most of them are actually underground. One of the really good stories came at the end of 2022. So this is the solar array. It was completed down at the sewage lagoon in Shannon Road just at the end of 2022. So 2023 is the first full year we were able to realise the benefits of that new asset. So the aim was to reduce the power draw from the grid by 40%. By all accounts, it's doing that. And reducing the town's carbon footprint by 28 tonnes annually. We're projecting for 2023 we'll have at least $8,000 savings off the power bills for running that lagoon, which is really good in helping to mitigate the cost impacts of rate increases with operating that, and at the same time reducing the carbon emissions from the town. So the sewage utility budget for 2024, there's 2 main factors that are impacting it. We are seeing an increase in maintenance costs on the equipment that we have, and we're seeing a need to increase reserve allocations. As you saw from the first slide, there is a lot of expensive assets involved in operating the utility. It's important we have enough money, not just for repairs and maintenance today, but for investments in the future so we can keep operating the utility efficiently. We've identified that reserves are too low, currently around just over $100,000. We've developed a little bit of a roadmap to get us to $1.2 million by the end of 2029. So where do the funds come from to operate the utility? Well, they come from user fees, and there's from 86% of the user fees are paid by households, with a small percentage commercial and institutional facilities. What's the makeup of the expenses? It's a pretty evenly spread, it looks like a wagon wheel to me. We've got administration, collection, lift stations, lagoon, and debt payments. And you can see $100,000 allocated for reserve allocation. So what administration is requesting is a $20 increase to the user charge. Currently in 2023 it's $350, and our recommendation is to increase that by $20 to $370. That represents a 6% increase. If we look at the expenses, you'll notice that there's a 9% increase in expenses. So you might be asking, how, if we have a 9% increase in expenses, how are we able to only increase user fees by 6%? And this is one of the really good stories about development in the town. The development officer referred to the new apartment buildings on River Valley Drive and Colonel Nays. So just new developments from 2023 added $11,000 in user revenue to the utility. And just that small amount, which seems like, you know, it's a $700,000 budget, but just that extra $11,000 means that when costs go up 9%, we only have to put the user rate up 6%. So for every new user that connects, it helps manage the rate for the existing users. So that's another reason we need to promote growth and new development in the community. It not only helps the assessment growth, but it helps the utility that those households connect to. One of the really good initiatives that the Assistant Treasurer and myself undertook last year was we compiled a 5-year forecast of the utility budget. And what this does, it gives us visibility into the future. So decisions today, they're important for today, but they also affect the future and the coming years. So what we can see is that we need to increase the rate by $20 this year, but after that, the increases should be minimal, approximately $10 a year for the next 5 years, which is around 2.5%. What does that do for the bottom line moving forward? Well, I mentioned before that reserve balances were low. So by just increasing that small amount, the fee, just that small amount, we are able to grow our reserves over the next 5 years up to $1.2 million. So we have a lot of different assets that comprise the sewage utility. These are not cheap things to repair. A pipe breaks under the road, to dig up the road. So we need adequate funds in reserve to deal with any eventuality. A really good example that that council can relate to of why reserves are important is the trickling filter plant up on McLean Road. This is something that was identified in 2021 that needed repairs. It was originally estimated to cost $100,000. On further research and looking at market pricing, talking to some engineers, the cost went up to $400,000. When you have $100,000 in reserves, a $400,000 project is a real stretch. So this project is currently, it's on the back burner. We're working on a way to rationalize the costs. So we're not including it in the capital plan for 2024, but we will be coming back to council in the future with a solution to this problem. Before we move on, are there any questions on the sewage utility budget?
I have a question, James. You talked about the trickling filter plant as an example, and the fact that we didn't have adequate reserves in order to manage that unexpected cost when it came in at far more than budgeted. What happens without proper reserves if we have a project that happens, a failure or something that is significant that we do have to handle right away? How does that get managed, and how does that impact our ratepayers without having a properly funded reserve?
What we would have to do is we'd have to take a loan through the province, through a debenture, That takes time. One of the challenges with that is cash flowing a project of that magnitude when you don't have the reserves. So that's a really challenging situation to work through. Over the long run, a loan, it costs more than having the money now.
So, Your Worship, just to build on James's answer, the other option, which we're not in a position to do either, is borrow from ourselves. We have general reserves. It's not uncommon, if we run into a situation that you described, that we can borrow from ourselves, and then the utility part of our budget would pay back the general part plus interest. And we're just talking about interest that equals the rate of inflation, so that we don't lose the purchasing power that the operating or the capital reserve has. However, we are in the situation, Your Worship in Council, where our reserves currently sit about $1.2 million. That's really insufficient for our general needs as well as the utility department needs. So we really don't have any capacity to borrow from ourselves either. And to go to the province cap in hand, and they're not timely. And as James said, the cash flow expense, the financing cost of it up front, where we have to have the money up front, we don't have. So it's going to be potentially cap in hand to the province.
And it would end up being more costly to the ratepayers at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and that's not what we want.
Thank you.
Council.
So say within the next 5 years, there's no disasters and we get to 2029, we've put up 1.2 million in reserves. Will the rate for residents level off?
It's hard to say at this point. There's a variety of factors that will play into that. What we'd like to see is if we get a healthy growth of new users coming on board, that any increases can be kept minimal. That's the goal.
If we had to wait a couple of years with that 400,000 go down to 200,000 to 300,000, the 400,000 would go down because of the demand.
History would say that it's not going to get any cheaper, Councillor. Thank you. I'll hand off to John. He's going to take you through the process of
Thank you, James. And before we get going here, I just want to commend the leadership team. There's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Everybody on this team really cares about the town. I think if you got us together in the room fighting over a penny, we'd have a lot of copper wire. And so I just want to take my hat off and thank everybody for the diligence and the efforts that they make in doing that. And so in building a project, as I said at the beginning, we started this the end of June. We may even start a little bit earlier as we compiled the different data sheets that are required to help with the decision making internally. Now, there's the process, but what goes into the discussions and the meetings that we have? And there's a lot, and there's James and I get together talking, and then we go over to Gary and say, Gary, what about the ball field lights? And doing follow-up. There's a lot of that's spent. And what are we talking about? Well, part of it, what is necessary? What do we have to do? And what's a want? Because a want is something that typically, how do we justify that to council that we're going to spend your money, town's money, on a want? So that's part of the discussion. Another part of the discussion, what can be deferred? Do we have to do it today, or is it something that we can postpone till a later date? And so if people have been watching River Valley and Narapis Road, we've cut back on spending in some of the other roads. And the roads are in such good condition that we can reallocate money for some other things. But we can't keep deferring projects. There comes a due date, so to speak, where, you know what, the can's been kicked far enough down the road, it has to be done today. And some of those issues are playgrounds, as an example, in recreation. We've talked about that for a couple of years. The other thing, too, that we talk about internally, and we try to inform council, the cheapest cost isn't always the best value for a dollar. So the discussion is, what's the best value for the price point? Sometimes it means spending a little bit more than the cheapest cost, but at the end of the day, we feel that we're going to get either better service, better quality, or something to make sure that the taxpayer dollars last longer. And that's our goal. And so, for an example, we've had internal dialogues regarding the lights at the ball field at River Valley Middle School. I think the projected cost to do that, rounded numbers, is about $130,000. And originally we thought, you know what? We can just phase this in. We'll do one pole or one section or something like that. And then we realized that we can't do it that way because the electricity doesn't line up. LED lights don't use as much electricity, so they need a different component to regulate the electricity than the lights that we currently use. So now we're at the stage where, hats off to the recreation director. He's scrounging the ends of the earth with his suppliers to try and find almost antique lights here. Yeah, almost antique lights that we can get them through another season so that we can do it. And then, of course, he'll be coming to council saying, with a plan about how we should move forward on that. So that's an illustration of what's going on in the process. So really, what are we trying to do with the budget? It's a year-round approach, and council sees this on a quarterly basis as well. What's the level of service? We intentionally did the fire department and snow control this past year, but next year one of the considerations is, what are we doing for parks? As an example, how high do we want the grass? Because once we can settle on the grass in the park, the grass along the guardrail, things like that, that'll tell us how much resources you want us to put in to the upkeep of parks. Then when you say that, what, we want really good soccer pitches, the soccer group has said we want 2-inch grass and we want it cut when it gets to 2 inches. Well, that's going to cost more than if we say, well, we just want 3 inches of grass, because that means we send less people over to cut the grass. And of course, we're always consulting and seeing what we can do about it. Then we come to you. We've done the level of service discussion, based on our data, both internally and externally, this is how much it's going to cost. And then you say, you know what, 2-inch grass would be good, but we can't afford it. We're going to go with 2.5 inches. We're going to do a compromise. And then finally, through the CFO and his assistant, you're going to be getting, currently you get quarterly reports. We want to bump that up to monthly reports so that you know how we're doing against your expectations and our residents' expectations. We are legislated in the Local Governance Act to balance the budget. So, for example, we've been talking about reserves today, both on the sewage side, but also in general, which we'll get to later. We have to justify that. We can't just hoard taxpayer money. We have to demonstrate how and when it will be used. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how is the tax bill determined. And I have to confess to a little culture shock when I moved here with the significant emphasis on the tax rate. That was new to me. That's never something that I focused on prior to coming here. So let's just take for an example that, the fire department's going to operate the way it is. Snow, we're only going to plow it when it's 3 inches deep or something like that. The grass will be cut when it's at 2.5 inches. To do all that, provide council with reports is going to cost $5,000. Our assessment base is $330,000. What's the tax rate? Well, the tax rate is the number that tells me that we need to charge each home over $1,600 so we can offset the cost. How do I know that it's $1,600? Because there's a formula using the tax rate that tells me. All the tax rate does is help us determine how much each home has to pay. That's all it is. It's not a metric, it's just a tool. What council should be asking us is, how much are our taxes going to go up? Not how much the tax rate is going to go up or down. So Now, we've been emphasizing growth in the budget and the need for growth. So what happens when housing stock increases? So housing stock goes up, our cost of services go up. So in this example, all of a sudden, instead of everybody paying over $1,600, they pay $1,500. And how much they pay has gone down because we have more properties. And the tax rate was that last tool to tell us that based on the value of your home, based on the value times the tax rate tells us that your tax bill is $1,500. So in review of this little section on the tax rate and the tax burden, when costs increase and there's no change in the assessment, our tax burden is going to go up, your tax bill, and it just means your tax rate goes up. If costs remain stable, which is our goal, and just a heads up, a spoiler alert for later in the show, operating costs only increase 3.3% for 2024. But when there's that, the tax bill stays the same and the tax rate falls. What happens when we bring in enough new housing? What happens when we have that, what I call a virtual growth cycle, which we can talk about later? When we get there, everything works out. Your tax bill goes down, we can provide more services because there's more people paying. And that means your tax rate goes down. So at the end of the day, as James has been saying, we need more residential and non-residential development. And our development officer brought it up today, and what we'll be bringing to council is a new incentive program, and it's designed around half, so that we're in alignment with what our proposal was. So no, we've not heard yet on what we're getting from half. But we'll be repealing it. Those who have acted under it, and I think it's only one developer right now, is that right? Yeah. They'll still be grandfathered in. But the purpose is, as David said earlier, to increase the missing middle, which is housing units with multi-unit housing with 2 bedrooms or more, and then seniors. Seniors is 55 plus. So the program for developers, and we're going to be meeting developers Wednesday night, is that we can provide either upfront capital cost grants. So say, for an example, they have hydrology, water issues. We may be able to offset those costs through a grant. Or they may decide, you know what, we want a post-completion incentive grant. We can do that. But if they build more than 24 or more units, they'll be eligible for both types of grants. So who's eligible? It's, as I said earlier, either missing middle or seniors. It has to be located in what the sexy name that we have is the residential stable intensification area. And that is basically from Hallandale south. And then, again, as I said earlier, you have to have a minimum of 6 living units of at least 2 bedrooms for missing middle, or for seniors, at least 12 independent senior living units. And then I'm going to turn this over to James again, but before I do, any quick questions regarding this previous section? Rick?
Thank you, John. Okay, in the next section, we're going to just walk you through the proposed operating budget for 2024. So the first part we're going to look at is revenue. Where do we get our revenue from? We get it from property taxes, just under 90%. Other revenue makes up 8%, and then a small piece, 3%, comes from community funding from the province. Let's just focus on that 3%. I know we mentioned it earlier, but just going to focus on that 3% for a second, just to give some perspective of how that's changed over the years. So this is the community and equalisation funding grant that we've received since 2019. So it was up around $600,000. Currently, it's at $230,000. So that is a significant slice out of the revenue for the town. I mentioned it before, but really the only way to make that up is through operational savings and then increased taxation. If we look at the expenditure side of the equation, there's some factors that are affecting our expenditures. We've talked about some already. We'll talk about them a little bit more here and further on in the presentation. So we can categorize the factors into things that we can control and things that are outside of our control. Unfortunately, the ones that are out of our control are tilting the scale. Inflation, RCMP, there's a real lack of clarity around costs for RCMP. We do not have our 2024 costing numbers from the province for RCMP yet. So we've factored in a 5% increase from last year. And we'll have that firmed up before we bring the final budget to council for approval on November 14th. But it's not finalised yet. Regional costs have been increasing over the years with the Fundy Regional Service Commission and their new mandates. And a factor you won't, or an item you won't see reflected in the budget here though, is a non-financial one. In that, yes, the funding to Fundy Regional Service Commission has increased, but so has the time commitment from the Mayor, Council and staff. There's a number of committees that they are on, and that time commitment has increased quite dramatically over the past couple of years. Snow and ice control, administration's done its best to mitigate the impacts of that. We did receive the $1.1 million tender price last year, so we have worked hard to mitigate that, but there are still increased costs involved. To balance that out, we try our best to achieve operational savings, but we operate on a lean, and I emphasize lean budget. So we do the best that we can to get more from less. If we just talk a little bit more about inflation, just give a couple of examples that we might be able to relate to. So since 2021, asphalt has increased in price by 88%. So that really leaves us one of two options. We double the budget for road work, or we keep the budget the same and just do half as much. It's a real balancing act. Equipment maintenance has increased in price. There's a labour shortage of mechanics. There's issues getting parts. It takes longer to get something repaired. Where it might have taken a week to get a pickup truck repaired, now it goes in and you get it back a month later. What does that mean? Well, it means we need backup equipment. So instead of one municipal trackless tractor we used to have, we now have 3. Our costs increase. And it also creates challenges with long-term planning. We're going to talk, we talked earlier in the sewage budget that we have a 5-year plan, we have a 5-year capital plan, we have a 3-year operational budget. It's challenging to forecast where costs are going to be in 5 years' time when inflation is doing what it's doing and the supply chain is responding like it is. So it just creates some challenges and some uncertainty when we look far into the future. This next graphic just demonstrates where we were, where we are, and where we could have been for snow control. So the grey line at the bottom was the previous contract that the town had with AVL. The yellow line at the top was the tender that was received last year. And then the blue line is the path we're on now. So we're performing this work in-house, we acquired the equipment, we have the workforce, we're hitting the road. So we're projecting the costs aren't going to be 1.1 million, but they're more than what they used to be. So staff has done a really good job of mitigating the impacts, but costs are still up. This next graphic is just to give people an idea of, when they pay their taxes, where does the money go? So for every $100 that we collect in tax, a good part of it goes to general government, protective services, transportation. These are capital, labour-intensive operations we have, and then smaller amounts for the other departments. How does that compare to 2023? So you can see that there are modest increases in most of the departments, and even some departments have decreases in costs. The two I just want to highlight, and we're going to talk about them a little bit more, are reserves and debt payments at the bottom there. So reserves in 2023, we did no reserve allocations, no budgeted reserve allocations. In 24, we're budgeting just under 500,000. And debt payments are going up 45%. So if we look at it, the town's debt cost over time, it has risen this year. New loans have come online for the new fire truck and some snow removal equipment that we purchased. So we're spending just under $500,000. This is the principal payments and the interest. Where does that stand and where should we be? The province has a guideline that we should not be spending any more than 20% of our budget, our yearly budget, on debt costs. Right now we are at 6%. So we're in a good place. 500,000 seems like a lot of money, but we're at a good mix at the moment. In the future, debt costs will increase as we take on some projects. The Works Garage will be one of those projects. We'll get to that when we talk about the capital plan, but that will incur a good amount of debt further down the road. But we have to remember, as our assessment base grows, as the town gets bigger, the budget gets bigger, so that we still want to be in that sweet spot, 6 to 10% is where we want to be. Reserves. We've mentioned it a few times already tonight. Don't want to sound like a broken record, but this won't be the last time we mention it tonight. So, what are reserves and why do we need them? Well, reserves is a way for the town to put money aside today that we can utilise tomorrow. So traditionally reserves have been looked at as a place to save money. Maybe we're trying to buy a new pickup truck and we can't afford, we can't budget $100,000 in 1 year, so we put $10,000 a year away, so in 10 years time we can buy the pickup truck. And that's a valid way to look at reserves, and it's still true. Another way, or another lens you can look through with reserves is around insurance. How do we insure ourselves if something goes wrong? Maybe equipment fails. Maybe we have flooding, like happened in 2018, 2019, and there's significant damage to town assets. We have insurance policies in place, that is true, and the province quite often will help out with funding in those situations. But it can be timely to receive those funds. If there's damage to vital infrastructure, we would have to repair them as quickly as we could, and could incur significant cost. By having reserves on hand, we can tap into those, utilise them when we need to, and then pay them back when we've received the funding. So by combining the insurance perspective and the savings perspective is where we start to build financial resiliency. And that's just the perspective we're starting to look at reserves through. So what's the reserve situation right now? At the end of 2022, the balance was $1.8 million. We're Already this year, we've drawn down $750,000 out of our capital reserve. We purchased some public works equipment, some modifications to a fire truck, and some mowers. So it's imperative that we replenish these capital reserves over the next 3 to 4 years to get them back up to and beyond where they were at the end of 2022. So over time, this is what it looks like. And Council has done a great job over the past, since 2019, at building these reserves up. I really put us in a good position. We needed to tap into them to get snow control up and running, and it's important that we follow the green path now back to where we were. Operating reserves. Just pause for a moment. We talked about capital reserves and we talked about operating reserves. What's the difference? Okay, so capital reserves, we use them to purchase big assets, plows, maybe substantial work at the sewage lagoon. Operating reserves are for day-to-day costs. So things that come up in the run of business that perhaps we don't have the funds on hand or they weren't built into the budget. We can tap into our reserves to get things done that maybe they come out of the blue, maybe an opportunity presents itself that we didn't foresee. We can use those operating reserves. So provincial regulations limit the amount we can have in operating reserves to 5% of last year's expenditures. So we can't just put as much money as we want into operating reserves. However, best practice is that should be around 20%. If it's at the 20% level, what that allows us to do is to cover 2 to 3 months of operational costs. 5% does not allow that. It probably gives us 3 weeks. So the current balance of our operating reserves are $450,000, and that is just around 5%. So this is something that we're advocating with the province, that we need more room to reach the financial resiliency piece. We need more than 5% there in operating reserves. Cost to be confirmed. So I mentioned before RCMP, we still don't have a final cost for the RCMP. And then curbside garbage collection in Ward 2, we don't have a final cost of that service yet. What we've done to try to mitigate any cost impact there is we're working with the rural district. We're part of their tendering process. The hope there is that with a bigger tender, we can mitigate any cost impacts that are felt there. Any questions on those slides before we move on to capital? So capital budget for 2024. Earlier in the year, we worked on a 5-year capital plan. The town had a 5-year capital plan. What we did is we took a step back, looked at it in a different way, and developed a scoring matrix. We went through every project, gave it a score out of 50 points, factored in health and safety factors, legal, the strategic objectives of council. And what that did is it gave us an objective way to organise the capital projects. Then what we did is we looked at any operational reasons why one should be done in a particular year or not, maybe fleet item need replacing. And then we looked at our budget. What can we afford in a given year? Put all those pieces together and we developed our 5-year capital plan. What this did is it provided us direction for 2024. What do we need to do in 2024 to stay on track? So the capital budget for 2024 is $1.8 million. We're looking at investments in transportation, general government, fire rescue, and the Recreation Department. The largest investment will be in transportation, just under $1.2 million, with smaller amounts to be spent in general government, recreation, and fire. So, what are we looking to achieve in general government? We're going to look at replacing the digital sign that's in front of the Centrum. We've found that the communications manager found that this is a great way to communicate information to residents, whether there are limitations on what can be shown on that sign. So we're looking for something a little bit more dynamic, something that we can convey more information on. So that's one of the items. We're looking at some repairs and renovations to the Centrum here, really around organisational capacity. How can we best use the space that we have? A new municipal information system, and our current server is at the end of its life. In the fire rescue department, they need to replace the jaws of life, and then the utility task vehicle, or UTV, that's at its end of its life. I believe it's 17 years old. The fire department, they've recorded an increased use of that vehicle. They get a lot more calls where they need to utilise it, and the reliability is just not there. So that's a real vital piece of infrastructure that they need. Parks and Recreation. Lone Water Farm was mentioned earlier this evening. This property is currently going through the surplus property process with the province. So we've allocated funds that if the possibility comes up to acquire that property, that's something that we would like to try to achieve. There's funds in the budget for an outdoor recreation hub. We're looking at some concepts and consultation around what that could be and what it could look like. And then the Trails Master Plan. So this was an item that was before council recently, and what we're looking at is a plan. How can we utilise pieces of land that the town owns to connect communities, build trails. We're looking at consultation with the community to see what they would like, and really develop a plan. In the transportation department, again, they're going to continue their street improvements. The designated highway project, which is Route 177, Nearapis and River Valley. In 2024, there's going to be continued curbing up by the golf course. I believe they're starting that project imminently, and so that will continue in 2024. Ferry Road, Nearapis Road intersection. This is just across from the eatery and the river centre. We're looking at a crosswalk there so residents can cross the road safely. It's a complicated project. We have to involve the province, we have to involve Transport Canada, MB Southern, and ourselves. So there's some studies underway at the moment, and we're hoping to make some progress on that project in 2024. Public Works Garage. This will be a multi-year project. So the hope for 2024 is that we can start with get some drawings made, some concepts, perhaps start with some site preparations, and then that work will continue in 25 and probably in 26. The song shed on Shannon Road needs some repairs, and there's a cross country of Hillendale that needs replacing. It's a long list of projects, so how do we pay for all these things? So the CCBF, or the Canada Community Building Fund, they provide us with funding each year. We'll tap into some provincial debentures. We're going to use some reserve funds, and then the remainder will come from operations. Before I hand back to John, are there any questions from council? Thank you.
Thanks, James. Thank you, council, and I'm pleased to say we're getting close to the end. Just some notes from myself just regarding our general situation, and maybe some policy considerations going forward on a number of fronts. I have to say, since coming here, that budgets have been challenging to pull together. We've been hit on every side of the seam since I've been here. Maybe not my very first budget for 2021, but since then, the first year in November, we were hit with about a $350,000 cut, just like 2 or 3 weeks before the budget was due. And then it's been compounded with local governance reform, the province reallocating funding. I'd also like to point out that when you look across Canada and you look at the different taxing agencies, which is the federal government, the provincial government, municipalities, we only collect 8 cents. That's all we collect. And then out of that 8 cents, it's us who pays for 66% of the infrastructure. And so I do think municipalities deserve respect and recognition for the fact of how we stretch the pennies. I teased earlier a little bit about the leadership team reinventing the copper wire every year, and it's true. The other issue that we have, and we're addressing it, we outlined this in our HAF application. We've been talking about it nonstop tonight. We need to grow our housing stock because the route that we're on is going to be very challenging in the future to ensure that we cover costs with sustainable tax levels. We have to find a way to a virtuous growth cycle. What is a virtuous growth cycle? Well, James alluded to it in the sewage budget example where the rate only went up 6%, but expenses went up 9%. What we need is enough investment each year so that it generates the revenue we need to be able to offset the cost of providing some of the service for these new properties. So for an example, say, a healthier level for us would be maybe 40, 50 homes. Multiply that by an average of, say, $3,500 in property tax, and it changes our situation significantly. We're very sensitive to inflation here. We don't have very much room to grow revenue because 98% of our assessment base is our neighbors paying their property tax. So we really need to find a way where we can get investment this year that develops revenue for next year. And then we can in turn reinvest that revenue into helping the community grow or providing the types of services that our community needs. The other thing, talk about policy. We had a resolution for council on that there be a sustainable funding model with the province. This year, or in 2024, we're going to receive about $230,000 from the province in unconditional funding. When I left Saskatchewan in 2020, the province had given us over $900,000 in unconditional funding. We really need to I know, our mayor's been very good, council's been good to advocate. We need to continue doing this. There are different ways of doing things. There are different ways of having a relationship with the province so that we can better serve our residents, especially when we're only collecting 8 cents and we need support. I was very interested to see this slide that I'm showing. But there's really only 3 taxing authorities in the country: the federal government, provincial government, and municipalities. And then there's different types of taxes that are collected. Consumption taxes. So the consumption tax is, when you buy a product, you have to pay 15% toward the HST. Corporations pay taxes. It's kind of like a corporate income tax, if you will. There's income tax. Those are the taxes that you and I see. Now, those 3 types of taxes are somewhat invisible. We get our pay stub, we look at it, voila, I'm getting this much deposit in my bank account this week. We don't really, well, maybe this is my fault, I don't really look to see how much the government is taking, because it doesn't hurt It's there, they took it already. Interesting note, just learned about this over the weekend. Russia has an interesting tax collection system. Every cash register in the country is connected to the finance department. So as soon as the transaction happens, that information is sent to the central office in Moscow, and they know exactly how much tax you should be paying. I'm not saying we should do that, but there's a different take on consumption taxes. In consumption taxes, we see it when we pay. And then income tax, we see it on our pay stub. Corporations will see it as well. Municipal taxes, that's the visible tax. That's the tax that hurts all of us. Why does it hurt? Even though we pay less in municipal tax than we do in income tax, or corporations pay, or potentially the amount that we pay in property tax is less than some of us pay in consumption tax. That's because we have to sit down. If you're on an app, you go in there, you schedule the payment, and it goes. Or you write out a check, and you see that money almost physically leave your account. That's the pain point of property tax. But what this slide shows, and this is from FCM, is when you look at all the different types of taxes collected, there's only one that has gone down in their share of taxes collected. It wasn't the federal government, and it wasn't the provincial government. So, I want to thank councils across the country for sound fiscal management. Now, the other thing that is impacting us is, we've talked about the lack of housing. We really need more housing. We really need to have policies in place, and we're doing that. We'll be bringing the incentive program forward. We've done a lot of work through the municipal plan and the zoning bylaw since 2021 to make us more developer friendly. I'm very pleased to report that developers that I've spoken with, they very much like working with David. So there's really no reason to stop them from coming here. The other thing that is that's happened is there's been deferral in investments. Formerly, investment was in roads. When you look at the some of our facilities, such as the Centrum, you look at our playgrounds at the Lions Park or at Ridgeway, or our Broken Lights at the ball field, we really need to make investments in a more holistic approach, if you pardon the expression, that yes, we have a lot of roads, but we also have a lot of other assets that we need to address. The other thing too that we've deferred and we've now made, I think, excellent investments is in people. Excellent investment, pardon the expression, in Brock, our communications manager. Frankly, it's difficult to see where we'd be without him when it comes to transparency and openness. Look at the quality of this budget. Well, I'm embarrassed by the first budget that I delivered. It's basically me, the assistant treasurer, and our consultant. There were no projections. We didn't do any sensitivity analysis as to what was reasonable, what was not. We have a whole whack of tools so that council can be better informed, and residents know that we're doing everything we can to ensure that their dollars are being spent. And then, not last or not least, is the recreation program coordinator. The fantastic work that he's done, working with community groups, the events that we have, how much better they seem to be. So we've been making some necessary investments that I think are providing value to council. And here's another area that, we had the assessment agency in earlier in the year. We've been advocating with them and that we need accurate assessments. And when we have accurate assessments, everybody is paying their fair share. As I said before, the tax rate is really just a tool to determine what is our share for my property for the overall part here. But our fair share is also determined by everybody's house has a current market assessment. And usually a 3-year gap between assessments is reasonable. We have areas in town that haven't been assessed in years, and they're undervalued. What we need is more housing. Wednesday night, some of us are going to be meeting with developers to learn and to help them understand what's going on here in Grand Bay-Westfield and what a great place it is not only to live, but if you're a developer, it's good to work here as well. We've met with real estate, with a real estate company. Wonderful turnout. I think we had 16 people, something like that here. And there's a great exchange of information. We've invited other real estate agencies to meet with us, and we had one, and then that didn't work out. But we really need more housing here, not just because we have a housing shortage, but just for financial relief on the tax burden. And it's kind of a chicken and egg, you know, do you want more commercial, do you want more residential? I think the chicken here is housing, and then once that chicken lays an egg, in the sense of we're gonna have more chickens, then maybe commercial will come along with it, and we're prepared for that as well. Really, what we're trying to do is achieve new growth to be vibrant and sustainable. Council's goals are about 200 million in new assessment, 1,000 in population, and those are reasonable targets. And at the end of the day, I can't stress it enough, to be financially sustainable as well. We did talk earlier, James mentioned earlier that the best way to describe our financial position is fragile, and that couldn't be more true. James is talking at great lengths about inflation. I want to take another different turn at inflation, and when we look at the budget, inflation rate that we're working on was the last one posted for September that came out in October, and it was at 4%. So when we look at how much extra revenue are we requesting, 4% is a 0% increase. Now you may think, John, you're being cynical, trying to pull one over. That's not the case at all. All we're trying to do is maintain pace with inflation. If we lose pace with inflation, our purchasing power diminishes as well. We do not want to lose that ability. Just like as a homeowner with their own property, there are some purchases you want to purchase now rather than putting off. Now, above that 4% is where that's going to be the tax increase. Tax burden. You know, we've tried to emphasize that the tax rate is just a tool to help us understand what everybody's fair share is. That's all it's about. It helps calculate each individual's revenue, expense, so to speak, for the tax bill. Last year, the tax rate went up. However, the tax rate went down. Sorry. However, the tax burden went up. We really do not want to do that. We want to be able to pull the rate down. We want to pull the overall burden down. How much taxes are we paying? We need to pull that down. And as I said earlier, we're in a tough financial season. And we're expecting by 2026, assuming modest new assessment growth, not inflated assessment growth because we have a housing shortage and our houses are artificially overvalued, but just modest. So what we're projecting next year, all things being equal, no more curveballs like this year, 7% next year, 4% in 2026, 3% in 2027. And should we have even better assessment growth, like that's new construction, new apartments, new seniors housing, all those things, we could be more optimistic next year when we do our projections. How do we get there? And, you know, in short, we have a housing shortage. You know, this is a good time to sell land if you have it. You know, if you're a developer and you can get the land, this is a good time to prepare the land for development. And then finally, builders, we need you to build homes here in Grand Bay-Westfield. So with that little preamble, I'm going to turn it over to James for the hard numbers. I just want to provide some of the color around some of the challenges that we have. Some of them are policy, some of them are just the bare bones of where we see our future going forward. Is there any questions about that? Okay. Thanks, James. So James has all the good news.
Thanks for setting it up, John. Okay, so this is the meat now of the budget. So for 2024 general operating fund, we're requesting $614,000 in new funds. This would represent an 8.9% increase from 2023. So if we look at provincial inflation being 4%, based on what John was saying, we could look at the other 4.9% above the 4%. That represents investments in the future. So we're increasing our debt repayments and increasing reserve allocations for future capital investments. If we look at it a slightly different way, so on the positive side, we have non-tax revenue that's actually increasing 25%. So that puts us $182,000 to the good. Operations is increasing 3.3%. So again, when you put that in perspective with inflation of 4%, it shows you the efficiencies that we're able to gain for 2024. Capital expenses are slightly down, debt repayments are up, and then $500,000 allocated for reserves gets us to that 8.9% increase. So what impact will this budget have on residents' tax rate? So it used to be relatively straightforward. It's now more complicated. So we have Ward 1 and we have Ward 2 now. So there's provincial guidelines at how we work out and calculate the tax rate. We're provided with a worksheet from the province. And what we do is we go through and we divide up the costs to either be local costs or shared costs. Local costs are activities that just occur in one ward and not the other, and shared costs are for activities that occur across both wards. So in Ward 1, we're responsible for maintaining, ploughing, repairing the roads. In Ward 2, we're not responsible for that activity. So that becomes a local cost to Ward 1. In Ward 2, there's curbside garbage collection. In Ward 1, there's not. So that becomes a local cost to Ward 2. All the other costs and revenues are shared. So the fire department, the recreation department, administration are shared across both wards. So we went through the process to work out the tax rates. Now, there's a separate guideline that says that Ward 2 can only go up by 5 cents. So we applied that guideline for Ward 2, but then any new costs for additional items can be added on to the 5 cents. So we've included just over 2 cents for garbage collection. We're anticipating an increase in costs for the curbside garbage collection. And then there was 5 new street lights installed in Ward 2. So that's a fraction of a penny there. So what do the numbers actually look like? I'm sure that's what everyone's asking themselves. So the change in tax rate for Ward 1 that we're proposing is just over a 4 cent reduction to $1.31. That represents a 3.2% decrease to the rate. And in Ward 2, following the provincial guidelines, it's just over 7 cents, which represents a 12.2% increase. So what sort of impact would that have on an average resident? So what we did is we took a $250,000 house in Ward 1, a $250,000 house in Ward 2 from 2023. The assessed value in Ward 1 grew by 11.4%. We apply the new tax rate to the value of their home, and you have an annual increase of $269. So this goes back to what John was talking about before, where the tax rate can be misleading, because here we have a tax rate going down, but because the assessed values rose, the tax bill is actually going up. And in Ward 2, if we followed the same process, we would see an annual increase in bills of $360 or around about $1 per day. Are there any questions from council?
I think you're good to move on, James.
So that concludes our presentation this evening. Our administration recommends that the Council of Town of Bay-Westfield accept the proposed operational budget for 2024 as presented, pending confirmation of the cost of RCMP and Ward 2 garbage collection. We also recommend that the Council of the Town of Bay-Westfield accept the proposed capital budget of $1,810,000 and that the Council of the Town of Bay-Westfield accept the proposed sewer budget for 2024 as presented with a user rate of $370. We'll be bringing this, once the final number is in, we'll be bringing it forward to Council on November 14th for final approval before we submit to the province on November 15th.
Thank you, James, and thank you, John and Hannah and all the staff for putting such an incredible, and Rob, of course, for putting such an exhaustive and extensive presentation together. I'm going to open the floor to questions from council regarding the budget, whether sewerage, capital, operating, etc. Does council have any questions for James or John or Deputy Mayor Toole?
I just have a quick comment just on the reserves. I know it's a big increase with the reserves in both the sewage and the regular budget, but I think looking back on the last few years, one of the frustrations we've had as a council is whenever we want to do something, you don't have anything to do anything with. So I know it's a tough thought to say, like, why are we putting so much in, but it makes so much sense having sat around this table and had that frustration over and over and over again. So I know the sewage one is directly related to if there's a failure, we need to be able to fix it. Because one of the main things we need to do is have your toilets flush. And if that doesn't happen, then people are not going to be happy. So I can see that logic. But on the other side, on the capital side, and on the operating side, we don't have anything to do anything with. And I think this is building us to a point where we can. So I really think we're doing what we need to do. So I do support that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know on the slide it talked about, insurance. That's one of the reasons that we have, and that leads to resiliency. But it also allows us to take advantage of opportunities.
Yes, and that's what we missed.
And that's important. John?
So, Your Worship, I was just going to comment to the Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much. Really appreciate those comments, but I want to point out that we're not trying to hoard money for the future. We want to strike a balance between user pay for assets, so that's where debt very much helps, is that the debt will be paid in the future by those who use it. But we also need the capacity and the leverage to be able to get things done as well. And we really, working with the CFO, working with everybody on the leadership team, how do we strike that balance? And that's something that we're very conscientious of, that to accomplish.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Burpee, then Councillor Falcon.
I have one question regarding, you mentioned earlier, John, that we were going to receive an amount for unconditional funding. Does that mean that it can be spent wherever it needs to be, or does that have to be spent in a certain area?
My understanding that kind of goes into our revenue pot.
Okay.
When I came here, it was worth about $660,000, I think. It was in that neighborhood. Now it's down to $230,000. The overall, if you don't mind, Your Worship, I think James said there was $62 million in that pot. In the late 90s, it was around $90 million. It was reduced. It does not receive inflationary increases, so that pot, that purchasing power is greatly diminished. And I'm very thankful that Council supported a resolution that there be a different funding formula that's tied to inflation. Specifically, if the economy goes up, municipalities get more, we all share in the wealth. If the economy goes down, we all share in the pain, and the best way of doing that is linking it to the province's share of the HST. But yeah, we need a different formula. There's a lot of pressure being put on. We don't have the same capacity to raise funds. Like I tried to outline, property tax hurts because we physically have to write a check or go on our app and set it, and we see it flow out of our account.
Thank you. Yeah, and one other point on the community organization grant, the core funding is dropping and it's being funneled, that money is being funneled to the regional service commissions, and it's being used to fund mandates that are typically the purview of the provincial government. So it's hollowing out and hurting our residents in terms of what we're able to provide in terms of core services and being able to implement our strategic plan, and going towards things like regional transportation, public safety, all of community development. So these are things that the provincial government has put on municipalities to deliver, but it's not funding them out of an autonomous pot. So that's really important for our residents to understand. Councillor Balcon?
Thank you, Your Worship. The overall tax burden for our residents is therefore going to be going up this year because of two factors. Even though the town is proposing a reduction in tax rate, the overall value of assessments, or the assessment base, is increasing. Part of that is due to keeping up with inflation, correct? Is it fair to say that our residents' assets, most likely, in most cases our housing stock, has been undervalued and underassessed over the last number of years vis-a-vis the rest of the country, and we're just playing catch up now?
That's a pretty large question, Councillor. At the end of the day, the market determines the value of the property. And if the market has been said a home sells for $200,000 and it sells for $200,000, it does. I know when I moved here from Saskatchewan, I thought I bought more house than what I paid for. But that was because I was used to a different market. Now, what's happened is that there's a housing shortage. I've had people like me move here from across the country. Scores of other people move here from across the country. We have lots of students. We have lots of other people who are immigrating here because of war, famine, or strife where they're from. And so there's more people looking for homes than, and our housing stock just isn't keeping pace. So that's what's driving up the value of the homes. So the assessed value is based on the market, but the market has changed substantially. The other thing too, Envision St. John did a study about how many homes do we need built every year. And I'm sorry, I don't know that I've got, James, do you remember the number? Because I don't know that I have my finger on the exact number.
I don't, it was a significant number.
Yeah, so we'll call it, I think it was around, we were building in the St. John region less than 1,000 homes a year. I want to say around 700. That's for round numbers. And I think we needed 2,200.
2,500, yeah.
Yeah, and so that gap is really challenging, and that's what's causing everybody's assessment value to go up, because there's all kinds of people looking for homes and we don't have them available. And it's just like, you go to the store and there's lots of a product on there. Usually it's more affordable, but we don't have a lot of product on the shelf. Sorry.
And Councillor, just to expand on that, I'm co-chair of the Municipal Assessment Service New Brunswick, and we were talking about the increase in the assessment base province-wide. The assessment branch was talking about the base increase drivers, and there's a 24% increase in average home price since 2021. Currently 5,000 units under construction across the province, 30,000 or more new people, and 7.8% real GDP increase since 2020. So all of those play a role in the assessment increase over the last couple of years, coupled with the fact that the assessment branch hasn't had the boots on the ground to do the assessments in a timely fashion province-wide.
Sorry, Your Worship. I think I'd like to go back to your question, just expand a little bit more, Councillor.
Thank you.
Part of it is that New Brunswick's been a have-not province for so long. And that really has that impact, not just on pricing, but also the outlook on what we want to do or can do. Because in a have-not province, risk takes on a different psychological value. Like if I want to try this, but people are moving, so I don't want to build. And it's a perfectly rational state of mind. I remember in Saskatchewan, when we moved there, Saskatchewan was a have-not province, and then it became a have province. And I think it took a couple of years, and then I think it was Premier Brad Wall at the time said, well, this is the new normal. And it just seemed to resonate across the province, and attitudes changed. But no, it's part of the wonderful thing about trying to become a have province is overcoming these challenges. I hope that makes sense,
It
guys.
certainly does, thank you. It's just basic economic supply and demand.
Councillor McIntosh Lawrence, then Councillor Bennett.
The presentation was very thorough and transparent, so I don't really have a question about that. I do have a question about local government reform going forward, and if there's anything else on the horizon and any costs associated with it that we're going to be responsible for.
Well, I think there's one thing that I'm concerned about specifically locally that we have to watch for, and then just in general, and if you don't mind, I'll start with the general answer. The province, I forget, it's scheduled for October, the end of September. We're supposed to have a fiscal summit. I really don't think local government's reform is complete until we have a fiscal summit. We've mentioned here directly and indirectly that the funding formula in the province is broken. When you look at DTI and how we look after highways, that's not sustainable. Municipalities need more say because it's our assets, our people drive them every day. We know what condition they're in. And then also the unconditional grant. We get a pittance, and then what little pittance we did get is being redirected for, I shouldn't comment, that's a political matter, but it's being redirected to the Regional Service Commission. So local government reform really needs to look at the fiscal reform that's needed. And once that's underway, then it's tweaking around the edges about mandates that are being downloaded and stuff like that. But really the core function is that. The local concern is specifically around Ward 2. The Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, DTI, wasn't prepared, wasn't able to transfer responsibility for the roads this year. But my understanding is that's going to be coming. When it's coming, I don't know. But we're in no position to assume that responsibility. Excuse me, then finally, Ward 2 is the Salmon Rock water and wastewater system. That system, well, you heard James talk about the sewage budget, how we need reserves, how the price has been increasing. When I came here, I think the sewage rate was $2.55. Maybe I shouldn't brag about how much rates have gone up. They're now at $3.70. There's no discounts. We're trying to be prudent in making sure that we can address issues as they arise, and such as breaks, such as a trickling water plant, but also for future investments. Given that the sewage rate at Salmon Rock has not changed in 20, 30 years, I'm very concerned that once that is turned over to us, is the province going to turn over the necessary monetary resources to pay for the upgrades that will be needed, just the regular ongoing maintenance. My understanding, the system was built in the 70s. That tells me a lot of the pipes are coming to the end of their natural life. Underground pipes, depending on the soil, can last 40 to 80 years. We have no idea what the condition is. Do we know I don't know that the province knows. And then there's the condition of the lagoon itself. It's a very passive system. Is that still, that system complies today, but when it comes to us, what condition will it be in, and will it be compliant then? Because environmental regulations are changing, and it's right beside the river. There's effluent that goes out. are we compliant? I'm very concerned about the fiscal summit and then the roads and water and wastewater system.
Going back to taxation, but most of our people in our town are over 60 years old or more, so it was on a pension or on a set rate for the income. This assessment taxes will affect them, people who have on a set rate, so double their taxes, that's a hard on them, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so then plus $20 for our water, it's the sewage rate, that's an equal to $20 tax, so $20 or double your taxes on your property tax, that's a.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree, Councillor. We are working to get seniors housing in town. We did do a business plan. We will be trying to attract a third party to do that.
I mean in their own houses right now, they live in existing houses that I live in, right? So they're burdened with a $10 tax bill or a bigger tax bill. That hurts your baseline, right? Guess what's money a month?
Oh, I absolutely agree. So what we're trying to do is that by having a seniors living complex, independent, they'll be able to move into something that's affordable because their homes are worth more now than 30 years ago when they bought it. And then that'll free up housing for young families and whatnot to move in, fix up the house over time, and increase their equity. I entirely agree, Councillor. This isn't a problem that just happened in 1 or 2 years. This is a problem that's been developing for 10, 15, 20 plus years. So long. Yes.
And it's also, there's also the spike protection mechanism, which applies to residences that have an increase of assessment over 10%. Just to give you an idea, over the last 10 years of what that has looked like, when the program was brought into existence in 2013, 13,000 properties benefited from the spike protection mechanism. In 2022, it was 67,000 properties across the province. In 2023, it was 143,000 properties. And in 2024, 176,000 properties will be eligible for the spike protection mechanism, which mitigates those cost increases. So it's all over the province.
Yeah, but how to protect the people who move from Ontario, BC, Riverside, next to the neighbor next to you, they spend 3 times the amount for the assessment value of a house. So they look at you and say, that house next door went for $500,000, you're going to get assessed with $500,000 to do that. Because it's like you're bought in, you're sucked in that little bubble life almost. And that's just, I was not fair, but at the end of the day, I guess it is what it is, right?
I entirely agree, Councillor. It's not fair. I would love to do. We don't even have the capacity to be able to have a different rate for different areas of town. We're very limited in what we can do. We've really, we have found significant savings in areas. You know, when we started in June, just to give council an example, and James, correct me if I'm wrong. So when we first started this process, the end of June, James pulled me into the office, and I think he's a little embarrassed. He says, "We're starting at $1.50 for a tax rate." Was it $1.50 or $1.52?
It was $1.52.
Yeah. Okay. That's where we started.
Yeah, I attended that last meeting with the seniors. We had a seniors meeting here not long ago about the senior home. They're trying to keep people in their home. Really, they're trying to put a Band-Aid on something that's played so long, like the downplay for so many years. Now they're trying to fix it in a short. So you get a Band-Aid. They stay in your home. We'll help you out now, but a little too late then. So, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? You know, since this council started its mandate in 2021, you know, the province has taken almost $400,000 away from us in terms of transfers. You know, we've had an increase in government mandated RSC costs. You know, we've been dealing with the intense effects of inflation, such as asphalt being increased in cost by 88%. You know, that's we've mitigated expenses by bringing snow and ice control in-house, but it's still more expensive than it used to be, even though we're saving money over the contract by doing it this way. And the costs of our RCMP contract have gone up and will continue to go up. And we haven't even gotten what it's going to cost us to outfit all of our RCMP members with body cams. So we've had a lot of hits come at us over the last couple of years, and you know, for staff to have brought forward a budget over the last few years, the way they have, I think is just exemplary, but you're right, it's tough. It's tough, and the province needs to step up, and it needs to fund municipalities in a more sustainable way so that our residents don't feel the pain the way they are now.
Did a great job on the budget too, James, and it was great to hear that, he explained to the public more understanding, and for people to understand how it simplified ways, so appreciate that.
Councillor Day?
I'm sitting here tonight and looking at asphalt and how it's increased over the years. And on my road trip this summer, we saw a lot of roads being made with concrete. And, I'm sitting here thinking, if it's gone up that much now, and there's a real push for us to keep going green, so that means less oil coming out of the ground, and asphalt is huge oil particles and whatever else is in it. We're gonna really be hit with the number of kilometerage we have in this town, which is huge. We're gonna really be hard pressed to keep going and covering the roads like we've been in the past. And every election I've ever gone through, the thing people bring up at the door is the conditions of the roads. So, maybe in a year, maybe in another year, we're gonna need to look at what other ways can we construct roads or even replace roads that over time reduces the cost of asphalt and maybe keeps a road in better shape than what we're being faced with the winters and the summers that we're having.
Thanks, Councillor. Do we have any other questions for our CFO or CAO? Okay, and I will read the motion. The motion is that the Council of the Town of Grand Bay-Westfield refer the presentation to the Council meeting of November 14th, 2023 for decision. Do I have a motion? Councillor Bellmans, thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Burton. Any further questions or comments on the motion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Thank you, Council. I know I've already said this, but I really have to thank our leadership team and all of our staff for working so hard. This budget process begins, when everybody is still out at the beach and not necessarily thinking about what happens in November. So it takes a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of forward thinking, and I appreciate the efforts put forward by each and every one of you to, cut where you can, to think creatively, and to bring the best value that we can bring to our residents. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll move on to item 8, adjournment. The motion is that the Council of the Town of Grand Bay-Westfield adjourn the meeting at 8:04 p.m. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Toole. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor McIntosh Lawrence. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Thank you, Council.